What is your favorite probiotic food?
Kombucha.
Yes.
Did you know that? Without even having to ask.
Yes, that's why I asked. Spencer drinks
Loaded question.
kombucha on the daily, and
Yeah,
we know that it changes your gut microbiome. Welcome to the Komplete Nutrition Podcast.
The podcast where we break free from the dieting cycle and explore sustainable, realistic ways to improve your health.
I'm Kylie, a registered dietitian with over 10 years of experience.
And I'm Spencer, and I've been eating food my entire life. And I happen to be a nurse.
Each week, we dive into the science, psychology, and strategies behind mindful eating and sustainable change.
Whether you're here to transform your relationship with food, learn how to make lasting lifestyle changes, or are simply curious about what true health looks like, you're in the right place.
We invite you to subscribe and tag along if you'd like to stop dieting and start living. This episode is brought to you by the bacteria strains Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. Actually, don't know how you say those.
Or is it Firmicutes?
Oh, maybe it is Firmicutes.
Another I.
Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. DTs.
I don't know.
Okay, we're not microbiologists, but these are two of the most common strains of bacteria in our gut. They make up 90% of our gut microbiome. We have more gut microorganisms than we do cells in our body. And these particular strains, they contain lactobacillus, which you'll see a lot in probiotics. It's a very beneficial strain. And a really quick history and walk down, I would say memory lane, but no one remembers this. So back during the, I don't even know how to say this too. All of these words I don't know. The Dognigan dynasty.
I don't know.
And also in ancient Greece, they used fecal transplants where they would take people's feces and transplant them into the person. How they did it anciently, I am not sure.
Why would they ever think to do that? That is interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And anyway, so that is something that is or was done, and it wasn't started to be studied in the 1970s, which is really crazy that seems like a lot more recent than I would have thought, that we started studying more about the microbiome. It's a very young research, and that's what we're talking about today is the microbiome. And I get super nerdy about this type of stuff. I find it super fascinating, and I'm excited to talk about the gut microbiome.
It is cool. I remember you're the first person that told me about it, and I had no idea that it was a thing. And then I started hearing it more places. It is cool. It's a really cool thing. It's a whole civilization living inside of our belly and on our skin and everywhere, our mucous membranes and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. Well, and to add to, the fecal transplant thing, I think is super interesting too. So do you know how they do those?
Nowadays or in ancient times?
Nowadays. I actually don't know how they did in ancient times.
I'm imagining it was.
I'm sure you could imagine.
Not super, yeah. Nowadays, I know that they can sometimes dry people's feces and like put it in a capsule so you can eat it.
Yeah.
Right? And then sometimes they do direct ones, right? Where they
it's like an enema.
We'll give you an enema of somebody's
place.
Straight up poop.
Yeah. And
that's nuts.
They don't do it here, but in the East Coast, if you meet certain qualifications, you can get paid for your poop.
Wow. Kylie sounds really excited about that.
I think it's amazing.
She wants to get paid. Some weird stuff.
And so, but the thing is that they take, if you meet these qualifications, I'm sure you have to be like free of disease, have like a healthy diet.
Probably have never taken an antibiotic in your life.
Exercise, all of these things. And then they pay you, and then you get these like donor fecal transplants.
That's cool.
Super intriguing. Anyways, that's I have patients. So a lot of times people with C. diff, C. diff is a really bad infection that's super common in the hospital setting. It's very infectious. So if one patient gets it, it's really easy to pass it on to somebody else. And if you get it, it's really easy to get it again. And so I have patients who have had multiple fecal transplants to help restore their gut. Yeah.
Have you ever had somebody that's had a fecal transplant? Because I never have.
Multiple.
Whenever we have somebody with C. diff, we just treat them with vancomycin, which is just a really strong antibiotic for those that don't know.
Yeah.
Because ironically, C. diff is caused by overuse of antibiotics. It kills your microbiome, and then Clostridium difficile.
Difficile? I don't know how you say that either.
How you say it?
We need a microbiologist to come correct us.
It's like all the other bacteria are dead, and then it overgrows and destroys your belly. Anyway.
And so one of the treatments, because it is common to reoccur, is to get these fecal transplants to help restore your gut microbiome. And I think it works.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So
it's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I wish that we had the facilities to do something like that. I'm sure we can. Anyway.
Oh, that's at cool. Your rehab?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably get people who need it enough. Yeah.
Not a ton, but still. Anyway, cool. So Kylie, we've kind of jumped ahead of ourselves. What even is the gut microbiome?
So the gut microbiome is specific to our intestinal tract, right? So really in any orifice, all of our cracks and crannies that contain moisture and warmth, we have our own little ecosystems.
Don't overthink that.
There's an oral microbiome. There's a vaginal microbiome. And then, we essentially have microorganisms all over us, but they're in higher concentration in these darker, more moist places. And in our gut, we have all of these microorganisms. And like I said before, we have more microorganisms in our gut than we do have cells in our bodies, which I think is a really crazy thing to think about.
Wild.
So there's bacteria, there's a virus, there's archaea, there's fungi, and all of these things live inside of us. And we have this symbiotic relationship with these microorganisms. So what we eat, they eat as well. And this microorganism, this microbiome, it starts in our mouth, and the stomach acid actually kills off most of it. So there's next to nothing that lives in our stomach because it's such an acidic environment. But then once it hits your small intestine, you start to slowly increase in concentration. They measure it in colony forming units. And it's like in the billions of how many colony forming units you have in your gut. And it slowly increases till you hit, so it's in your small intestine, slowly increases till you hit this ileocecal valve, which separates the small intestine from the large intestine. And then the large intestine has the highest concentration of the gut microbiome. And that's where most of that, like the food breakdown and where our gut microbiome resides.
That's cool.
And interesting too. So infants are born with sterile guts, and that's part of I guess an infant's exposure to the world is they're building their immunity through antibodies, through receiving their mother's breast milk, but also through just exposure with everyday life and foods, and they start to build their own gut microbiome. Kind of interesting.
That is interesting. And isn't everybody's gut microbiome distinct?
It's like your thumbprint. So it's very unique to you. And to further describe what it is, as we eat food, our gut microbiome consumes that food as well, or leftovers of it, and then they produce these byproducts called metabolites, and they're beneficial to us. So they help with our immunity, they help lower cholesterol, they help with metabolism.
But yeah, that is cool. Just like how much the microbiome makes and how essential some of it is. Yeah.
So these metabolites, they do all of these good things. And specifically They help keep our mucosal lining healthy and keep that barrier healthy to prevent any like bad toxins or viruses get through and cause systemic chaos.
Chaos. That's what a virus wants. Okay. You kind of mentioned it. When we're babies, we're developing this ecosystem inside of ourselves. How is it developed in more detail?
So starting at birth, there's like whether you were born vaginally versus C-section. So a baby who passes through the vaginal canal is going to have more exposure to the mom's microbiome of her vagina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the C-section, there's less exposure. And so that gives that infant less of a chance of getting all of those good microbiome and microorganism exposure from mom, which you were a C-section baby, right? Maybe that's why you have gut issues.
Maybe, perhaps so. Don't they nowadays, maybe this is TMI for some people, but I think after C-sections, a lot of the time will take some of the vaginal juices. And
I don't think that's standard. I think you can request that.
Is that what it is? You can request it?
You can request, okay. Yeah. So if you are needing to have a C-section, what they'll do is they'll place like a cloth or something in the birth canal. And then after they'll rub it all over the baby just to make sure that the baby gets exposed to mom's microbiome. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So that makes an impact. And then whether you were breastfed versus formula fed also makes an impact of how your gut develops. And then also where you grow up. I think about all the kids that grew up. Well, this is an interesting thing that I think is partial to immunity, but I'm sure also gut microbiome. All the kids that grew up during COVID-19, where there was very little exposure to a lot of things. And this is maybe more so immunity, but our gut microbiome is part of our immune system and keeping our epithelial layer, our mucosal layer in our gut healthy. It was interesting. So, I work in the NICU, and after COVID, we had like one of the biggest outbreaks of RSV for kids. And the thought is that because the kids didn't have good immune systems, because they were all shut up and trying to not be exposed to people. Basically. Yeah. So growing up in a sterile environment, and how many antibiotics you've used or have had to take, what you eat, pollutants that you're exposed to, where you travel to, who you like interact with or kiss. I think about we're exchanging microbiomes. Yeah. And all of these things change your gut. And I think that's also interesting to note too, is that your gut microbiome continues to change because we continue to be exposed to these different things that can impact our gut.
Yeah. Crazy. Pretty cool. It's cool to think about just these whole worlds that go inside of us. Okay. What is the purpose of our gut microbiome?
We kind of already touched a little bit on that. So they produce what's called metabolites, and they're beneficial for our health. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We need those products that they create. Some of them. One of the byproducts is gas. That's when we have gas, that's from your gut microbiome. And from whatever they're eating, from what you've eaten. So first and foremost, they help us to maintain a healthy immune barrier from our intestines. And so if you've heard of leaky gut syndrome, that can happen when there's inflammation or a gut microbiome isn't healthy. And then the cells normally are really tightly spaced together. But if there's inflammation, or if we have an unhealthy a gut microbiome, it's called dysbiosis, is when that concentration it changes or it's harmful. The concentrations of bad bacteria are higher. They call them gap junctions. The spaces between the cells widen, and we no longer have this healthy immune barrier. And so more toxins and viruses and pathogens are able to pass through. And so our gut microbiome and these metabolites that they make are helpful in healing that and keeping that mucosal layer strong and healthy. So butyric acid, if you've ever heard of that, that's one of the metabolites, and it actually helps with lowering cholesterol. It also impacts our metabolism, and they've done some interesting studies with people with different conditions, and have seen that there are common differences in people's gut microbiome, that they have an increased amount of one strain of bacteria compared to others. And then our gut microbiome also helps with glucose regulation. And there's a super interesting study where they took rats who had sterile guts, and then, so I'm sure these are like younger specimen, and then they took feces from humans who they were specifically looking at people who had higher diets of artificial sugars, so like diet sodas, and they implanted the feces into the rats, and then these rats developed like glucose metabolism intolerances and issues. And
so they weren't able to metabolize glucose as well?
Like they basically developed like insulin resistance, and they weren't able to
they became diabetic, kind of.
I think more like pre-diabetic. Yeah. Okay. So starting to see some of these signs, which that is not to say, again, this is an animal study. We can't draw conclusions from animals to humans, right? But I do think it's interesting that these sugar substitutes are consumed by our gut microbiome, and it changes our gut microbiome. Anyways, I just thought it was super interesting, but I do want to clarify that we're not bashing on sugar substitutes, but if you have tummy issues and you drink or eat a lot of these sugar substitutes, maybe swapping those out for something else and seeing if that helps.
Would you just swap it out for straight up glucose, I guess?
Yeah, you could do regular sugar, or and there's so many different types of sugar substitutes. That could be a whole other podcast. So you could just try maybe a different brand that has a different sugar type.
That is interesting though.
Yeah. Anyway, so the gut microbiome also helps with nutrient absorption. It makes vitamin K. We talked about that, I believe, last time. And then there's this really interesting thing called the gut-brain axis. Have you heard of that before?
No.
So it's a two-way pathway from our brain to our gut. And it's this idea that if you, like when you're excited, you get butterflies in your stomach, or if you're nervous, you feel sick and you feel like you're going to throw up. Mm-hmm. So that how our brain feels or how we feel can impact our stomach, but also vice versa, that if our stomach is upset, it can make us feel more anxious or more depressed. And like this is something that I'll frequently discuss with some of my clients who have eating disorders and that have, I think it's super common to have also anxiety and depression with some of these things, and not eating isn't doing any favors to some of these like mood dysregulation. And so eating and maintaining a healthy gut also helps you to maintain a healthy brain and a healthy mind.
I feel like that also has a lot to be discovered and studied.
It's a very young science.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just in the 70s that we started, like, I'm sure it's been longer study than that, but with like the fecal transplants, I just think it's really crazy that it's just something so vast and so new, and there's so much that we're learning, and we don't know a lot, which I think can be frustrating for people with GI issues, because we don't have a lot of answers because there's not a lot of studies.
Indeed. I also meant specifically with like mood regulation and the gut-brain axis.
For sure. Yeah.
But that's cool. So one of my main questions, is like worrying about like the balances. Like, should I be worried about that? Like, what impacts or changes our gut microbiome? Like, should I be worried about something like that? Because like I don't ever really think about it.
I think there are some things that we don't have control over that changes our gut microbiome. So like pollution, I think I would be curious to know how much Utah has really poor air quality, how much that impacts our gut microbiome. And then antibiotics, how often you take antibiotics. I know a lot of people who are, I don't know what the word is, very
chronically ill, perhaps.
Well, maybe just like feel like, you know, they'll treat anything and everything with antibiotics and are taking antibiotics every other month.
Or that are susceptible to infection, for those that are like immunocompromised or something.
True. Yeah. And so I think being cautious about how often you're taking antibiotics, of course, I mean, take them if you're sick and you're needing it. But I think just being wise with your antibiotic use. Stress, that same gut-brain axis, stress makes a huge difference in how our gut is and how we digest food. If you think about if you are chronically in the fight or flight response, so we either are in the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, the stress response, or the parasympathetic response, which is the rest and digest. So if you are chronically stressed, your body isn't digesting food well. And so some of that food can go undigested and then your gut bacteria has a heyday. So stress does play a huge role in our gut microbiome. So managing stress is helpful.
Which is just more stressful for stressed out people to hear.
Do the best that you can. And then there's different illnesses. So like inflammatory bowel disease, celiac and Crohn's, I've got that in my family and that can change. We talked about C. diff earlier. If you have food poisoning or if you go to, I think about Spencer and I went to, was El Salvador last year and you got sick. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that probably he ate the street food that locals told us. And said, the natives always get sick. And I didn't eat it. And Spencer ate it. And what happened?
It was worth it. Would do again.
He got sick.
Not that sick. A little bit sick.
Okay. And then specifically what we eat is going to make the biggest impact on our gut microbiome. So within food, there's prebiotics and probiotics. They also talk about postbiotics, which we'll talk about later. But with food, we can eat probiotic foods, what is your favorite probiotic food?
Kombucha.
Yes.
Did you know that? Without even having to ask?
Yes, that's why I asked. Spencer drinks
loaded question.
Kombucha on the daily. And we know that it changes your gut microbiome because what happened when you were drinking it on the daily?
I mean, my breath smelled pretty bad.
Yeah, it changed.
And I don't know, just smelled different. It just smelled different. It smelled like I had a lot of vinegar.
No, Spencer's breath definitely did change when he was, even after like brushing his teeth, after drinking kombucha every single day.
Yeah, it was horrifying to find that out.
Anyway, so probiotics are foods that contain live bacteria. So kombucha, kefir is one. That's like the yogurt milk drink. I actually like it. Do you like it? You do like it.
Kefir? Yeah. I do.
Kefir. There's a drink called Suja that we just discovered that isn't vinegary. That's probably like the most normal tasting probiotic. We'd recommend that.
Yeah. Like all fermented foods would be considered probiotic, right?
Yeah.
Like
sauerkraut. Sourdough doesn't, if you were to eat it raw, you cook it,
that's true.
Kills off all the bacteria. But that's a good thought though. Miso, tempeh, kimchi. So a lot of these Asian foods. Oh, the natto we talked about last time too. So a lot of different Asian foods that contain actual bacteria and can be beneficial to our body. I will also comment and say that apple cider vinegar has probiotics. And if you are choosing to consume that, you only need 1 tablespoon and it needs to be diluted in water.
They're going to rot your teeth.
I had a patient
Is
who
that
was
why?
drinking it, and it took off the enamel of his teeth.
Yikes. Yeah.
So
No, it's freaking acid.
So yeah, so do eat your probiotics wisely. Recommendations, a couple times a day is what's recommended. I don't know. I probably get it a couple times a month. Spencer probably gets it a couple times a week.
Yeah.
That's why he has, questionable. You don't have a better microbiome. So
I'm building it. I'm building an army.
You're building it.
I'm building an army.
So probiotics contain the live bacteria. Prebiotics are foods that promote the growth of your microorganisms. And it's basically plant food are going to be the things that promote the growth of your good gut bacteria. So we just learned that artificial sugars and sugar substitutes can promote the growth of maybe the not so great microorganisms. But all of your fruits and vegetables, your nuts, your beans, your grains, all of those types of foods, they call them fermentable. Your bacteria consume them, so it's considered fermenting. And those types of foods can help increase your gut microbiome.
That's cool. It seems like it always comes down to just like eat a balanced meal and you'll be fine.
Eat balanced and like eat more whole foods, right?
Yeah. Nice. Okay, cool. So talking about things that change our gut microbiome, Kylie, what happens if it's negatively impacted? Will we die?
Eventually, yes.
Eventually.
So it can change our glucose regulations. Like we talked about that interesting study with rats. If you aren't eating well, I guess it can impact inflammation and you can have systemic inflammation. It can also change your digestion. And so you might notice that like the color of your poop is different. You might notice that you're more gassy, more bloated. People can notice like more abdominal distension, more abdominal pain, depending on how their gut health is and their gut microbiome. And then it can also impact your mental health and specifically your immunity. And there are certain conditions, which we'll bring up in later episodes. So there's things you can have infections of your intestines where you either have that dysbiosis of different concentrations of your gut microbiome, like the bad bacteria is higher, or the concentration is higher where it shouldn't be. And so SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, is one type of infection. There's also SIFO, which is it's a fungal overgrowth of your small intestine. And then with inflammatory bowel disease, they know that the gut microbiome changes, and for that one, they actually don't know what comes first, if the disease causes the change or if the change causes the disease, but they know that there is a gut microbiome change. And then IBS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome, is directly impacted by your gut microbiome, and that plays a role as well.
Those are some rough things. Kylie specializes in a lot of those, though. She sees a lot of gut folks. Okay, so for those that are worried about it now, like I kind of am, what do you do to maintain a healthy gut microbiome? We've kind of talked about some of it, but tell us more.
So we'll summarize. So eating prebiotic foods, which are basically all of your plant foods, and then your probiotic foods, which are your bacteria containing food. You can take supplements that contain prebiotics, probiotics. So actually contain like fiber and then strains of bacteria, and then postbiotics are like the metabolites. So like it contains butyric acid. The research is pretty mixed on probiotics. I would say I don't take a probiotic. I am maybe more of a foods first dietitian, where I feel like we can grow our own gut microbiome. And I have had I've had some people who feel like these supplements are game changers, but I've also had some people that feel like it doesn't do anything or it makes their symptoms worse. So I guess I have mixed reviews on the actual supplements, but I am a huge fan of foods first and trying to build your gut microbiome through actual foods.
That makes sense. I feel like throwing probiotic supplements as kind of like an umbrella solution when everybody has such a different gut microbiome and what's going on.
Yeah. And there's so many different strains too.
Yeah. And it's just usually one strain, right?
No, you can get multi-strain probiotics.
Can you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't even know.
Yeah, you can get single strain, multi-strain. Yeah.
Anyway,
exercise is super important. It helps with like transit and keeping things moving. I would recommend to avoid grazing or piecing on food, snacking on food all day. It's important for us to have space between our meals or our snacks to allow for our gut to push things downstream. And then eating consistently. So not skipping meals, and so not eating all day long, grazing in between, but eating still consistently. And then sleep is super important. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's actually a GI modulator, and getting enough sleep can help keep our gut healthy. Staying hydrated, getting enough water, and then I think also, this is kind of a funny recommendation, but not being as big of a germ freak, I guess, is letting your kids play in the dirt, and it's okay to get a little bit of exposure to help build that gut microbiome and your immune system.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of I just forgot what it's called. The clean theory. That's not what it's called.
Yeah. What is that theory? Yeah. What is it called?
The hygiene hypothesis.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
That's what it's called. Okay. So a quick summarization of what we've talked about. We talked about what the gut microbiome is, which, let's see if I get this right. It's a bunch of bacteria in your belly, I guess.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
Simplified.
Maybe summarize to me your key takeaways of how to keep your gut microbiome happy and healthy.
The best ways to keep it happy is to sing to it, to eat. I mean, for you, it's food first dietitian. You're a food first dietitian. So it really sounds like eating healthy foods. You talked about eating fermentable foods was something that I will remember, which is...
fermented food. There's actually a difference between fermentable and fermented.
Yeah, I was talking about fermentable, the prebiotics,
yes.
Right?
Yes,
yeah,
good use of your words.
Thank you. I learned today prebiotic foods, eating your prebiotic foods, which is your foods that are able to be fermented inside your belly, and then also eating probiotics, which is foods that already have bacteria in them. And those are ways to keep your belly healthy. And I'd say, because obviously when I drank too much kombucha, which is a great probiotic, it had a bit of a negative impact. It made me a bit gassier. Listen to your body. And too much of a good thing is still too much. So anyway, but yeah, eating a balanced diet is really what it seems like it comes
balanced. Down to. Maybe not washing your hands as often. And getting good sleep and staying hydrated and keeping active and not stressing.
Just stop.
Yep. Just kidding. Just don't do it.
Just stop. It's easy. All right. Cool. Gut microbiome is a cool place. Lots to learn.
It is. That's all for now. We'll see you next week. If you are listening, we imagine that you are probably on your own health journey. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of this journey. We want to invite you to consider these 3 questions as a weekly personal check-in.
The first question is that maintaining a positive mindset is crucial for success. So, what are your victories and your wins from the past week?
Second question, what are your intentions or focus or goals for this next week? Reminder that the simpler and more realistic, the better.
And the last question is, what are you going to do to accomplish this goal? Be specific, and we invite you to write this down somewhere. What specific things will you do to reach this goal of yours?
Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you are listening to, we would invite you to subscribe. We'd also invite you to leave a review. If you do, you will be entered into our monthly drawing to win a box of meal deliveries. Take a screenshot of your review and send it to Komplete Nutrition, complete with a K, completenutrition@gmail.com. You can also check us out online at www.complete-nutrition.com or on Instagram at complete_nutrition.